Alright, so camera in the rain. I'm over at a park here in Portland, Oregon. A lot of people might recognize this as kind of the central point from the Occupy protests. It's got a World War memorial here. Interesting, an Applegate family shows up on there. Rex Applegate was from Oregon. I've been kind of a fan of him. Anyway, he's buried here in Oregon. So I wanted you to understand the significance of this location in that there's a few high-profile locations here. One of the reasons why they did the Occupy location here. Here is the federal courthouse, basically. Fed Central, although it's not their main only location for all federal operations, it is the main federal courthouse location. There's the main jail. Anybody who's in jail or prison for political reasons on a federal hold probably going to be housed in this building. That kind of open area up there is normally a recreation area for it. The Portland Police Bureau has offices and everything on the first couple floors of that. The rest of it's high-rise jail, I understand, was kind of patterned after one put in New York. Over here is a state-level courthouse, and at any given time there's probably a few people out there, you know, picketing, protesting, doing something to do with a local case. A lot of traffic in and out as far as you know, local cases stuff goes. A lot of homeless advocacy type people, things like that going on there. A little bit goofy about the way they move prisoners. Sometimes they walk them across the street or pack them up in vehicles and take them there. There is no underground passage that we know of. There's a public restroom here. It's kind of nicknamed the James Chassie Memorial because of a guy who was beaten to death for pissing on a bush out here. He was beaten to death and then taken into the jail, where they figured out that they wanted to try to get rid of the body, and the cop car, they were going to take him out and dump him on the street. The police cruiser that was carrying the body collided with another one because he was going out the in entrance or something like that. It kind of became a high-profile case. I think some settlements were paid, and the decision was made to reopen the public restrooms out here, which people hopefully don't abuse that, and because there was a lot of fear they would turn into camping central for the homeless people. And I think this one might have been closed during the Occupy protests. But anyway, so this is the park here in downtown Portland. And I want to get into a couple other subjects and some additional videos. I'm going to talk about jury nullification, and actually I will. I'm only 3 minutes into this introduction. So we're going to talk about what happens in especially politically hot climates when you have high profile cases, sometimes low profile cases. The homeless advocates over there usually are pretty well onto the game as far as advocacy with the cases that they have going in and out of there. And they get involved in a lot of cases here in Portland. But what you'll see is not a lot of pamphleting and stuff going on here, because there's, you know, obviously they'll get leaned on a little bit. A lot of the police that you'll see coming and going they're not really here to bully the crowd. It's that the parking areas they use before and after shift are down the street, and so what happens is the parking garages they had or parking areas kind of got wiped out and replaced by buildings. I think this one's the next one to go. So, you know, they're here, they're not necessarily here to bully people on the street. They're just going to and from work, shift change, stuff like that. But so let's say there is a case happening here in Portland, Oregon. This is going to be the location where people would meet. Okay, that's because it's centrally located to the courthouses. So Fu Ying Bro and his is showing the Salem locations. The thing is, Salem is not the federal hub for Portland, for Oregon. Salem is a state capital, it's not the federal hub. There's basically two federal hubs in Oregon. The more centrally located one is in Eugene, this one is here in Portland. If you get selected for jury duty, this is most likely where you're going to go. Parking can be really difficult, so a lot of people will actually park at a larger parking lot further away and then commute in on a train. Everybody does that. Every once in a while you can get a parking space here. The only way you're going to be able to get that and guarantee it is to have somebody come up and reserve the parking space for you, because they're highly coveted parking spaces, and even if you pay for it, you can't stay there all day. There's no special pass to do it. Every once in a while people used to be able to get a courthouse pass for it, not anymore. So you'll be going in through the front of either this building or this building to report for jury duty. You'll probably be taken to they'll treat you relatively nicely if you go in for jury duty. You'll be taken into a room to wait. Some people will go over some verification of identification, very normal thing, to determine your eligibility for jury duty, because sometimes if there's a pending case or other stuff going on, the jury members may be disqualified, but what's more likely is that you would just get picked to be a jury member in a different case. Jury duty is something that a lot of people, they want to kind of fluff that off, and they don't necessarily want to do jury duty, but the thing is, it is a duty. It's a patriotic duty. No matter what your political aspirations are or what you feel you want to support or not support, you probably should consider, accepting and serving jury duty when it's given to you. So you go, you get picked, you'll answer some questions. You should answer those questions in a relatively neutral manner. Don't lie in there directly, but answer questions in a relatively neutral manner, and just wait, okay? Because you don't talk a whole lot to the other people there about anything of substance, especially concerning your political beliefs, one way or the other on much of anything. Don't wear your NRA hats, don't wear any hats, logos, signs, or rings that might indicate anything on that, because the trick is not to avoid your jury duty. Lazy, stupid people will try to avoid jury duty. The Russians used to call them the refusnik, and I don't really care to address those people. If somebody's there to try and get out of it, I don't want to deal with them. So you'll go through a questionnaire, and then usually they'll start selecting people out. They're not going to tell you what the case is, but sometimes if you've been reading the newspapers or keeping up on the news, you'll start to figure it out from the nature of the questions that you're being asked on a jury selection. Now, what's going to happen on that is a lot of those questions are probably going to be geared toward more than one case that's happening at any given time. That's why you might be asked questions about immigration. At the same time, you're being asked questions about medical practice, and you wonder what's the relationship between the two. Well, there is no relationship between those two sets of questions. What it is they're going to relate to two different sets of juries that they're trying to form. And don't be surprised that even though there's a 12-person jury, a lot of times by the time you get into the first thing, there may be 50-80 people there that are going to be selected for further questioning for suitability for the next set of selection, so that they eventually get that down to 12 people that are accepted by both sides in the case. Now, over on a stateside jury, the defense lawyer has a lot more say. Okay, defense lawyers can make a little more happen. Now, in Oregon, it's a little bit more of a closed system on the state side, because it's more difficult for a lawyer to get certified to practice law in Oregon courts when they move in from out of state. Okay, they have to go in through a lot of additional schooling to be allowed to practice law here. And so there isn't necessarily the large pool of competent, well-capable, connected lawyers in this state as you would see, let's say, for example, in California. Because of that, if you go over to the federal side, you're going to find a lot of that same insulated lawyer pool, where it's you're not going to get as good of shark fin lawyers who have all of the local connections at a federal court here as you might see in other states. The other thing that we're running into as in the rights movement that I'm involved with is that when we have people going to federal court here, we're dealing with judges who were previously state level judges from Oregon. It's less standardized here than it is in other states and other places that have federal courts. So when we run into federal cases here, a lot of times it's just a state case plus federal law. I mean, that's what it really boils down to. A lot of the same lawyers, a lot of the same defense lawyers, the same prosecutors. But in the federal court, you are capable of bringing in lawyers from out of state, because if they're certified to practice law federally, usually they can go interstate and go to another federal court in another state. So jury pool selection that we've seen on the federal side, though, is it's government friendly, and it's one of the reasons for federal courts having much higher levels of conviction than in state courts. They get a lot more convictions on that. This is the thing where you really need to act as an infiltration agent to the jury pool. You need to get yourself into that final jury. Now, when I say there's going to be 12 people on a jury, there's also going to be 2 alternates selected, sometimes as many as 4 alternates. If somebody thinks they hadn't had if they think they had an issue with some of the jury pool people, but they haven't been able to figure it out by the time the trial started, they can still eliminate some people during the trial and just replace them with the alternates. And that's also in case somebody had a car accident, got sick, or something else is going on. So if you get in as an alternate, you still have to sit in the jury box, you still have to pay attention when everything's going on, and that's part of what happens when you're on jury duty. So when you go in, if you've finally made it through the entire selection process and you're sitting on a case, you need to not have any visible communication with anybody involved in the case. You'll be asked whether or not you were watching or reading it in the news. This is at the point where correct answers may not necessarily be truthful answers, okay? Because here in the United States, people have a right to a fair trial with all of the relevant information being considered by those who are making the decision. I want you to listen very carefully. People in the United States have a right to a fair trial where the decision makers may make their decision based on all of the relevant information. Now, here's where they cheat. Okay, here's where everybody on every side cheats, especially in the federal side, is they're highly selective of the information that they want the jury to see or hear. And it's not too hard to figure out which side doesn't really want you to know what really happened, doesn't really want you to know the truth. They also may want to be highly selective with how they feel the law is going to apply to the case, and that's in something that's called jury instructions. And I'm going to go over jury instructions in the next video because this one's got a little bit long. And it's very important for people to understand to answer questions correctly if you're called in for jury duty. Answer questions correctly while you're doing it and while you're listening to a case, and what to listen for during a case while you're on jury duty.